My name is Colton, and I was 11 years old when my parents decided they no longer wanted me. "You'll be back begging in a month," my mother smirked as my father slammed the door in my face, leaving me alone on our porch with nothing but a backpack and crushing betrayal. I thought my life was over that day. I was wrong. 6 years later, my phone lit up with dozens of missed calls. Suddenly, they desperately wanted back into my life. But by then, everything had changed. If you're watching this video, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happened when I finally decided whether to pick up that call. From the outside, we looked like the picture-perfect American family. Our two-story colonial house sat in an affluent suburb of Boston, with perfectly trimmed hedges and a white picket fence that my father insisted on repainting every spring. Dad worked as a financial advisor at a prestigious firm downtown, while Mom managed the social calendar that kept us connected to all the right families in our neighborhood. I was their only child, and for the first few years of my life, that seemed to be exactly how they wanted it. But appearances can be dangerously deceptive. Behind our glossy family photos and holiday cards, a different reality existed. My father was obsessed with status and perfection. Nothing was ever good enough, especially me. My mother, always elegant in public, was emotionally distant at home, treating me more like an accessory to be displayed than a child to be loved. I learned early on that my role was to enhance their image, not to be an actual person with needs and feelings. The first signs that something wasn't right began when I started elementary school. Other parents hugged their children and told them they were proud regardless of their grades. My parents only acknowledged my achievements if they were exceptional. A 95 on a math test would earn a cold, why not 100, from my father. My mother would simply purse her lips and remind me that Marsdens don't settle for second best. I developed coping mechanisms early. Books became my escape fantasy worlds, where children were valued simply for who they were. My imagination was my sanctuary. I had a special hiding spot in the attic where I'd go when the tension downstairs became too much. There, surrounded by old boxes and forgotten furniture, I'd read for hours, creating stories about families who actually wanted their children. Miss Patterson, my third-grade teacher, was the first to notice something was off. She asked me once why I never wanted to go home after school, preferring to stay and help clean the classroom instead. I remember struggling to find the words, not yet understanding that what happened in our house wasn't normal. "I just like helping," I told her. The concerned look in her eyes haunted me for years afterward. I had one friend in the neighborhood, Aiden, whose parents actually seemed to enjoy his company. When I visited their home, the easy laughter and casual affection confused and fascinated me. His mother would ruffle his hair and call him sweetie. His father played catch with him in the backyard. These simple acts of love were foreign to me, and I found myself making excuses to spend time at their house rather than return to my own. The cracks in our family facade began to widen when I turned 10. My father's expectations escalated from unreasonable to impossible. He enrolled me in every competitive activity possible: tennis, debate club, advanced math classes, scheduling my life down to the minute. "You need to stand out," he'd lecture. "Nobody remembers average." My mother enabled this behavior, often adding her own special brand of coldness. While my father's criticism was loud and direct, hers was subtle and cutting. "Your cousin Thomas has already been accepted into that prestigious summer program," she'd mention casually at dinner. I suppose not everyone has his natural abilities. The night of my school concert became a turning point. I had practiced for weeks to play a piano solo, hoping just once to see genuine pride in my parents' eyes. When I missed a few notes during my performance, I looked out to see my father's disgusted expression. He stood up and walked out before I finished. That night, he lectured me for an hour about embarrassing the family, while my mother silently sipped her wine, not once stepping in to defend me. That was when I truly began to understand. No matter what I did, it would never be enough. The realization was both devastating and strangely freeing. If perfection was impossible, maybe I could stop trying so hard to earn love that wasn't coming anyway. As my 11th birthday approached, the tension in our house had reached a breaking point. I was developing a personality of my own, asking questions, sometimes even daring to disagree with my father's opinions. Each small act of independence was met with increasing hostility. I could feel something building, like the air pressure before a storm. I just never imagined how destructive that storm would be. My 11th birthday fell on a Saturday in April. I woke up with that mix of hope and anxiety that every child of demanding parents knows too well. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe this time there would be warmth, celebration, acknowledgement that I existed beyond my achievements and usefulness to the family image. The morning started with my father informing me that my birthday celebration would be postponed because he had an important golf game with a potential client. My mother was busy preparing for a charity committee meeting. "We'll do something next weekend," she said without looking up from her planner. "The Richardsons are having that gala tonight anyway. We've already arranged for Mrs. Winters next door to check in on you." I nodded, swallowing my disappointment. It wasn't the first time my birthday had been treated as an inconvenience. Usually, I would have accepted this without comment, grateful that at least there would be something the following weekend, likely a formal dinner at an expensive restaurant where I'd be expected to demonstrate perfect manners and appropriate conversation skills. But something had shifted inside me. Perhaps it was turning 11, or maybe it was the accumulation of a lifetime of emotional neglect, but I found myself speaking up. "It's my birthday," I said quietly. "I thought we could do something together, as a family." My father lowered his newspaper, his expression a mixture of surprise and annoyance. "We've discussed this, Colton. The world doesn't stop because you were born. We have commitments." "You always have commitments," I replied, my voice stronger than I intended. "Everything is always more important than me." My mother's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "That's quite enough of that attitude. We provide you with everything you could possibly need. Many children would be grateful for the opportunities you have." "I don't care about opportunities," I said, feeling a strange courage building inside me. "I just want parents who actually want to spend time with me." My father stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I will not be spoken to this way in my own home. Go to your room until you can show proper respect." Instead of complying as I always had before, I stayed seated. "Why did you even have a child if you never wanted to be parents?" The silence that followed was electric. My mother's face went pale, while my father's turned an alarming shade of red. I had voiced the unspoken question that had haunted our house for years. "How dare you?" my father finally sputtered. "After everything we've sacrificed for you, you haven't sacrificed anything for me," I interrupted, shocked by my own boldness. "You only do things that make you look good to other people. You don't care about me at all." My father slammed his fist on the table, making the dishes rattle. "That's it. I've had enough of this disrespect. If you can't appreciate what we've given you, perhaps you need to learn what life is like without it." He stormed upstairs, and I could hear him yanking open drawers in my room. My mother remained at the table, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You've really done it now," she said coldly. "You know how he gets when he's like this." "Maybe if you ever stood up for me, things would be different," I replied, tears threatening to spill over. Her expression hardened further. "You brought this on yourself." My father returned with my school backpack, now stuffed with some clothes. He threw it at my feet. "If you think we're such terrible parents, you can leave. See how you manage on your own since we're such a burden to you." I stared at him in disbelief. "You're kicking me out? I'm 11 years old." "You're old enough to disrespect us. You're old enough to face the consequences," he said, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward the front door. "Maybe a night without your comfortable bed and all the privileges we provide will adjust your attitude." I looked to my mother, hoping she would intervene. She always maintained appearances above all else. Surely she wouldn't allow this. But she simply watched, making no move to stop him. "Mom?" I pleaded. She sighed, as if I were being unreasonable. "You need to learn, Colton. Actions have consequences." My father opened the front door and pushed me outside, tossing the backpack after me. I stumbled on the porch steps, scraping my hands on the concrete. "Dad, please," I begged, the reality of the situation finally hitting me. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it." My mother appeared in the doorway behind him. "You'll be back begging in a month," she smirked, her eyes cold. "And maybe then you'll have learned some gratitude." My father's expression showed no remorse, no hesitation. "Until then, you can reflect on your behavior elsewhere." The door slammed shut. I heard the lock click. I stood there in shock, staring at our house, my home, unable to process what had just happened. I was 11 years old, alone on the street, with a backpack containing a few clothes, and nothing else. No money. No phone. No plan. Night was falling, and with it came a chill that cut through my thin jacket. The reality of my situation began to sink in. They had actually thrown me out. Their own child, on my birthday. I sat on the curb across from our house for hours, certain they would come to their senses, open the door, and bring me back inside, perhaps with a lecture, but at least acknowledging that you don't throw a child out onto the street. The lights in the house went out one by one. I watched my parents' bedroom window go dark. They had gone to bed, knowing their 11-year-old child was outside alone. That was the moment I realized they weren't coming back for me. That was the moment my childhood truly ended. As midnight approached on what had become the worst birthday of my life, I finally accepted that my parents weren't going to change their minds, at least not that night. The temperature had dropped, and I was shivering, huddled against a tree in our neighbor's yard where I could still see my house but wouldn't be visible from the street. I couldn't stay outside all night. With no phone and no money, my options were severely limited. After considering my alternatives, I made the decision to go to Aiden's house. His family lived 3 blocks away, and while I was terrified of admitting what had happened, I was more afraid of spending the night alone outside. My hands trembled as I rang their doorbell. It was nearly midnight on a Saturday, and I half expected no one to answer. After what felt like an eternity, Aiden's father, Mr. Taylor, opened the door, his expression shifting from annoyance to concern when he saw me standing there. "Colton? What on earth are you doing out at this hour?" I tried to explain, but the words caught in my throat, and to my humiliation, I started crying instead. Mr. Taylor gently guided me inside, where Mrs. Taylor appeared in her bathrobe, immediately wrapping a blanket around my shoulders and sitting me down at their kitchen table. Between sobs, I finally managed to tell them what had happened. Their expressions changed from concern to disbelief to something I couldn't quite identify, anger mixed with resolution. "You're staying here tonight," Mrs. Taylor said firmly. "And tomorrow, we're sorting this out." They set me up in their guest room, brought me warm milk, and assured me that everything would be okay. The kindness they showed me, the simple human decency of treating a child with care, broke something open inside me. I cried myself to sleep that night, not just from the trauma of being thrown out, but from the realization of how abnormal my home life had been all along. The next morning, Mr. Taylor attempted to contact my parents. Their response shocked even him. My father coldly informed him that this was a family matter and that I was learning a necessary lesson about respect and gratitude. When Mr. Taylor pointed out that abandoning a child was illegal, my father replied that they hadn't abandoned me. They simply expected me to reflect on my behavior before returning home with a better attitude. Mrs. Taylor, a nurse at the local hospital, knew the protocol for suspected child abuse and neglect. By Monday morning, she had contacted both the school counselor and Child Protective Services. The machinery of the child welfare system moved with surprising speed after that. A social worker, named Miss Rodriguez, interviewed me at school, her kind eyes never judging as I recounted not just the events of my birthday but the years of emotional neglect that had preceded it. "Colton," she said gently after I finished, "what your parents did isn't just wrong, it's against the law. Children have rights, and one of those rights is to be safely housed and cared for by their parents. What happened wasn't your fault." Within days, a temporary custody hearing was scheduled. The Taylors volunteered to serve as my emergency foster placement until a more permanent solution could be arranged. CPS had visited my parents, who maintained that they had merely been disciplining me and had expected me to return home immediately. They claimed shock that I had gone to a neighbor's house instead of just coming back and apologizing. When confronted with the fact that they had locked the doors and gone to bed knowing their 11-year-old was outside alone, they had no satisfactory explanation. The court hearing was the first time I'd seen my parents since that night. They entered the courtroom looking polished and professional as always. My mother wore her pearls and a conservative navy dress. My father was in his best suit. They looked exactly like what they had always tried to project: respectable, upstanding citizens, the perfect family. But something had changed. I could see them clearly now. The cold calculation in their eyes. The way they cared more about how this looked to others than about what had happened to me. They didn't speak to me directly. Not once. The judge was a stern woman, with silver-streaked hair and penetrating eyes. She reviewed the case file carefully, occasionally glancing at my parents over her reading glasses. "Mr. and Mrs. Marsden," she finally said, "do you understand the seriousness of what you've done? You expelled a minor child, your child, from your home, without supervision, resources, or protection. In the state of Massachusetts, that constitutes child abandonment and neglect." My father straightened his tie. "Your Honor, This has been blown out of proportion. We were implementing necessary discipline for disrespectful behavior. We fully expected Colton to return home after a brief timeout to reconsider his actions. A timeout, the judge repeated flatly. Mr. Marsden, a timeout is sitting in a corner for 10 minutes, not putting a child out on the street overnight. The law doesn't recognize abandonment as a form of discipline. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, though I noticed no actual tears. We love our son, Your Honor. We only want what's best for him. The judge turned to me. Colton, do you wish to return to your parents' home at this time? The courtroom fell silent. This was the moment I had been dreading, the question I had been asking myself for days. Did I want to go home? I looked at my parents. All my life, I had tried to earn their love and approval. I had bent myself into impossible shapes, trying to be the perfect son they demanded. And when I had finally spoken up, they had thrown me away like I was nothing. No, Your Honor, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I don't feel safe there. The judge nodded, making a note in her file. Given the circumstances and the recommendations from Child Protective Services, I am granting temporary custody to the state. Colton will remain in emergency foster care while a more permanent placement is arranged. My parents' facade cracked for the first time. My father's face flushed with anger, while my mother's carefully composed expression faltered into something like shock. They had never imagined they wouldn't get their way. They had never considered that there might be consequences for their actions. As the hearing concluded, I was led out a different door from my parents. I caught one last glimpse of them, huddled with their lawyer, looking outraged and inconvenienced, but not heartbroken. Not like parents who had just lost their child. 2 weeks later, I was introduced to Mr. Jackson, a foster parent with over 15 years of experience, helping children from difficult situations. He lived in a modest but comfortable home about 20 minutes from my old neighborhood. He had a gentle voice, patient eyes, and hands roughened by years of carpentry work. It's going to take time, Colton, he told me as he showed me to my room, a simple space with a comfortable bed, a desk, and empty shelves waiting to be filled. Healing always does. But you're not alone anymore. I didn't know it then, but this man, a stranger who owed me nothing, would change the course of my life forever. The first few weeks with Mr. Jackson were a study in contrasts from my life with my biological parents. Where they had demanded perfection, he asked only for effort. Where they had withheld affection as a tool for control, he offered it freely, without conditions. Most startlingly, when I made mistakes, spilled milk at dinner, or forgot to do a chore, there were reasonable consequences, not explosive anger or threats of abandonment. Home is supposed to be the place where you're safe to mess up sometimes, he told me one evening after I'd apologized profusely for breaking a glass. That's how we learn. I didn't trust it at first. I kept waiting for the mask to slip, for the real Mr. Jackson to emerge once I had settled in. I maintained perfect grades, kept my room spotless, and spoke only when spoken to the survival tactics I'd developed over years with my parents. Mr. Jackson noticed. You don't have to earn your place here, Colton, he said gently one evening. You already have it, just by being you. The concept was so foreign to me that I couldn't absorb it at first. Meanwhile, the legal process continued. My parents were required to attend parenting classes and therapy if they wanted to work toward reunification. They attended exactly one session of each, before their lawyer informed the court that they had reconsidered and were voluntarily terminating their parental rights. They're releasing you from their custody, Miss Rodriguez explained when she came to update us. I know this is difficult to hear, Colton, but they've decided not to pursue reunification. I sat very still, absorbing this information. My parents had officially decided they didn't want me. The abandonment that began on my 11th birthday was now complete and legally binding. What happens to me now? I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. You'll remain in foster care, she explained. Mr. Jackson has agreed to be your long-term placement, if that's what you want. I looked at Mr. Jackson, who nodded reassuringly. As long as you want to stay, this is your home, he confirmed. That night, I allowed myself to really cry for the first time since the court hearing, not just for what had happened on my birthday, but for the entire childhood spent trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it. Mr. Jackson sat with me, not offering empty platitudes or telling me to stop, just providing the steady, comforting presence of someone who wasn't going to disappear when things got difficult. With the question of my parents' involvement resolved, I began the process of actually building a life rather than just surviving. The school in my new district was smaller than my previous one, And without the crushing pressure to be exceptional in everything, I discovered something surprising. I actually enjoyed learning when it wasn't connected to earning approval. Particularly, I found myself drawn to computers and programming. Mr. Jackson noticed my interest and scraped together enough money to buy a refurbished laptop for my 12th birthday. The first birthday gift I could remember receiving that was chosen with my interests in mind, rather than how it would appear to others. "It's not the newest model," he apologized. "It's perfect," I told him, meaning it in a way he couldn't possibly understand. I threw myself into learning to code, spending hours watching tutorials online and practicing. There was something soothing about the logical nature of programming. If you followed the rules correctly, the outcome was predictable. Unlike human relationships, there were no hidden expectations or moving targets. Therapy became another cornerstone of my new life. Initially resistant, my parents had always dismissed mental health support. As for weak people, I gradually came to value my weekly sessions with Dr. Bennett. She helped me understand that the problem had never been me. It had been the impossible and toxic expectations placed on me. "Children aren't meant to earn their parents' love," she explained. "That love should be unconditional. The fact that yours wasn't reflects their limitations, not your worth." It took months before I could truly believe her, but slowly, the constant voice of criticism in my head, which sounded suspiciously like my father, began to quiet. By the time I turned 13, I had settled into a routine that felt almost normal. I had made a few friends at school, not many, but enough. I joined the computer club and found myself among peers who valued intelligence without demanding perfection. I helped Mr. Jackson with his carpentry projects on weekends, learning to work with my hands and finding satisfaction in creating tangible things. At 14, I created my first real app, a simple program to help students organize their homework assignments. It wasn't revolutionary, but it worked well, and several of my classmates began using it. The school paper did a small feature on me, and for the first time, I experienced recognition that felt genuine rather than performative. Mr. Jackson proudly displayed the article on the refrigerator. "Always knew you were a genius," he said, ruffling my hair in a gesture that would have been unthinkable in my previous life, but now felt comforting and familiar. That same year, I legally changed my last name. I didn't want to be a Marsden anymore, not when the people who had given me that name had discarded me so easily. I didn't take Jackson's name either, though he offered. Instead, I chose Bennett, after my therapist who had helped me find my voice again. It was a small act of reclamation, of choosing my own identity rather than carrying the one that had been used to constrain me. By 15, I had developed my programming skills enough to create more sophisticated applications. I built a scheduling app for Mr. Jackson's carpentry business that helped him organize his projects and client information more efficiently. Seeing it actually make his life easier gave me a sense of purpose and pride I'd never experienced before. That summer, I attended a coding camp at the local community college, where I connected with mentors who recognized my potential and encouraged me to think bigger. One instructor in particular, Professor Lin, took me under his wing, providing advanced tutorials and challenging me with increasingly complex projects. "You have a gift, Colton," he told me. "But more importantly, you have the persistence to develop that gift into something remarkable." At 16, everything accelerated. I had been working on a new app for nearly a year, a tool that used artificial intelligence to help students with learning disabilities adapt their study methods to their specific needs. Inspired by a classmate who struggled with dyslexia, I had poured hundreds of hours into research and development. With Professor Lin's encouragement, I submitted it to a national competition for young innovators. I didn't expect much. There were entries from students at prestigious prep schools and specialized STEM academies, kids with resources and connections I couldn't imagine. When the email came announcing I was a finalist, Mr. Jackson and I stared at the screen in disbelief before breaking into simultaneous laughter and tears. "You did it, kid," he said, pulling me into a bear hug. "You actually did it." The competition finals were held in San Francisco. It was my first time on an airplane, my first time leaving the East Coast. Mr. Jackson used his savings to make the trip with me, never once making me feel like it was a burden or sacrifice. Standing on the stage, presenting my project to a panel of tech industry veterans, I felt a confidence I had never known before. This wasn't about pleasing anyone or earning approval, it was about creating something valuable, something that could help others. I won second place overall and first in the accessibility category. The prize included a cash award and more importantly, internship offers from several major tech companies. A reporter from a national tech blog interviewed me about my journey from self-taught programmer to award-winning developer. The article went viral, picked up by larger publications that framed it as an inspiring story of resilience and innovation. None mentioned my parents or my background in the foster care system. I had been careful to keep those details private, but they celebrated the support of my guardian and my dedication to creating technology that helped others. I returned home from San Francisco to find my ordinary life transformed. Colleges were reaching out with scholarship offers. Tech companies were expressing interest in my future projects. Local news wanted interviews. In the midst of this whirlwind, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, my phone lit up with a notification from a number I didn't recognize, and then another, and another. 6 years after they had slammed the door in my face, my parents were trying to contact me. The first voicemail from my mother was almost surreal in its casualness. "Colton, darling, it's Mom. We saw the article about your award. So proud of you. Call us back when you get a chance." As if we'd spoken last week. As if they hadn't legally surrendered their parental rights. As if they hadn't thrown me away when I was 11 years old. The second message, from my father, was more direct. "Son, impressive work with that app. Always knew you had potential. We should catch up soon. I have some connections in the tech industry who might be interested in your work." By the fifth call, the tone had shifted. "Colton, why aren't you answering? We're your parents. The least you could do is return our calls." I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone in disbelief, as the notifications continued to accumulate. Text messages, voicemails, even emails to my school account that they must have tracked down somehow. After 6 years of complete silence, not a birthday card, not a holiday greeting, not even a legal inquiry about my well-being, they were suddenly desperate to reconnect. It wasn't difficult to understand why. The article that had gone viral mentioned the interest from major tech companies. There had been speculation about potential buyout offers for my app. I wasn't just their discarded child anymore. I was someone with potential value, someone who might be useful to them again. Mr. Jackson found me still sitting there an hour later, phone clutched in my hand, messages unplayed and unread. "You okay, kid?" he asked, immediately sensing something was wrong. I wordlessly handed him the phone. He scrolled through the notifications, his expression darkening with each one. When he looked up, the anger in his eyes was palpable, but his voice remained steady. "You don't owe them anything," he said carefully. "Not a call back, not an explanation, not even acknowledgement. What do you want to do?" It was a question no one in my first 11 years of life had ever asked me. "What do you want?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to ignore them forever. Part of me wants to call back just to tell them exactly what I think of them. Both are valid options," he assured me. "And you don't have to decide right now." I chose to do nothing that day, or the next. The calls and messages continued, growing increasingly demanding. My mother's faux sweet tone gradually gave way to passive-aggressive guilt trips. My father's messages became more explicitly focused on the business potential of my app. "We should discuss your next steps," one message said. "You'll need guidance navigating these offers. As your parents, we want to make sure you're not being taken advantage of." As my parents. The audacity was breathtaking. Meanwhile, my actual life continued to evolve rapidly. A major tech company had made a formal offer to purchase my app for a sum that seemed unreal 7 figures, with the potential for ongoing royalties and a guaranteed internship position that could transition to full-time employment after college. The lawyers representing me provided pro bono by a nonprofit that supported young innovators from disadvantaged backgrounds, advised me to consider the offer seriously, but not to rush. At 17, I would need Mr. Say's vantaged backgrounds, Jackson, as my legal guardian, to help finalize any agreements. "This kind of opportunity changes lives," the lead attorney, Miss Patel, explained during a meeting at her downtown office. "But it's important that you understand exactly what you're signing and what it means for your future." Mr. Jackson, as always, made it clear that this was my decision. "It's your creation, Colton. Your future. I'm just here to support whatever you choose." While I was considering the offer, local media picked up the story. A newspaper ran a feature about the local teen tech prodigy, whose app was revolutionizing educational accessibility. They interviewed my computer science teacher, Professor Lin, and even a few classmates who had tested early versions of the software. The day after the article appeared, the calls from my parents tripled. And then they escalated their approach. I arrived home from school to find them sitting in their luxury SUV outside Mr. Jackson's modest house. My mother had her pearls on. My father wore his business suit. They looked exactly as I remembered them, yet somehow smaller. I froze on the sidewalk, my backpack suddenly heavy on my shoulders. 6 years of therapy, of building a new life, of healing, and the sight of them still had the power to stop me in my tracks. My father spotted me first, nudging my mother. They both stepped out of the car with practiced smiles that never reached their eyes. "Colton," my mother called, as if greeting me after a brief absence. "You've grown so much." My father approached with his hand extended, the consummate businessman. "Son, you're looking well." I didn't take his hand. I didn't move at all, paralyzed by a collision of past and present that I had never prepared for. Thankfully, Mr. Jackson arrived home at that moment, his truck pulling into the driveway. He assessed the situation instantly and was at my side in seconds, his hand on my shoulder, grounding, protective. "Mr. and Mrs. Marsden," he said, his voice uncharacteristically cold. "This is private property. Colton hasn't indicated he wants contact with you." My father's smile tightened. "We're his parents. We have every right." "No," Mr. Jackson interrupted firmly. "You surrendered those rights, legally and morally. If Colton wants to speak with you, that's his choice, but you don't get to ambush him at his home." My mother stepped forward, her voice taking on the wounded tone she had perfected for social occasions when she felt slighted. "We just want to reconnect with our son. Surely you can't object to that." "What I object to," Mr. Jackson replied, "is the timing of your sudden interest in reconnection. 6 years of silence, and now that he's in the news for a potentially valuable invention, you appear?" My father's facade slipped, irritation flashing across his face. "We've been following Colton's progress all along. We're proud of what he's accomplished." Finding my voice at last, I asked, "How? How have you been following me?" "You never called, never wrote, never tried to contact me until the article about the tech company offer." They exchanged a quick glance, the same look they used to share when caught in a social lie. My mother recovered first. "We thought you needed space, darling. After all, you were so angry when you left." "When I left?" The absurdity broke through my shock. "You threw me out. On my 11th birthday. You locked the door and went to bed knowing I was outside alone." My father waved his hand dismissively. "Ancient history. We've all grown since then. The point is, we're here now, when you're facing important decisions about your future, about this app of yours." And there it was, the real reason for their reappearance. Not concern for me, not regret for what they'd done, but the prospect of profiting from my success. "I need you to leave," I said quietly. "Colton, be reasonable," my father pressed. "You're still a minor. These tech companies will try to exploit you. You need family looking out for your interests." "I have family," I replied, moving closer to Mr. Jackson. "And I have lawyers, advisors, and mentors who've earned my trust. You haven't." My mother's expression hardened. "After everything we did for you, what exactly did you do for me?" I interrupted. "Years of therapy giving me the clarity and courage to stand my ground. You provided food and shelter for 11 years, yes. That's the legal minimum required of parents. But you never gave me the one thing every child actually needs, the security of knowing they're loved unconditionally." They had no answer for that, no practiced social script to fall back on. "Please leave," I repeated. "If I decide I want contact with you, I'll reach out." "This isn't over," my father said, the familiar threat in his tone reminding me of countless childhood confrontations. "We'll be discussing this with our attorney." Mr. Jackson stepped forward. "That's your right, but right now you're trespassing, and I'm asking you to leave my property before I call the police." They retreated to their car, my mother casting one last wounded look over her shoulder, a performance for neighbors who might be watching rather than a genuine expression of emotion. As they drove away, the tension drained from my body so rapidly that I nearly collapsed. Mr. Jackson steadied me, guiding me inside to the kitchen table where we had shared so many meals and conversations over the years. "You handled that really well," he said, placing a mug of hot chocolate in front of me, his standard remedy for difficult days, regardless of the season or temperature. "They haven't changed at all," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "Not one bit. People rarely do without serious motivation and effort," he replied. "And they never saw anything wrong with how they treated you." The calls continued, though less frequently after I blocked their numbers. Their lawyer contacted Miss Patel, making vague claims about parental rights and financial interest in my invention. She efficiently shut down each approach, reminding them that they had legally terminated their parental rights years ago and had no standing whatsoever. But the encounter had shaken something loose in me. After years of therapy, of building a new identity separate from them, I found myself plagued by old questions. Had I somehow deserved what happened? Could I have done something differently? Was there any possibility of resolution that wouldn't leave this wound forever open in my life? Dr. Bennett helped me work through these questions in our sessions. It's normal to seek closure, she explained. Humans instinctively try to make sense of trauma, to find a way to integrate it into our understanding of the world. But sometimes the only closure we get is the acceptance that some relationships can't be repaired not because we failed, but because the other people aren't capable of the necessary change. As I considered the tech company's offer and my future plans, the shadow of my parents' reappearance loomed over decisions that should have been joyful milestones. And I realized that until I confronted them directly on my terms, not theirs, I wouldn't be truly free to move forward. After discussing it thoroughly with Mr. Jackson and Dr. Bennett, I made a decision. I would meet with my parents once, in a controlled environment, with clear boundaries. Not to repair our relationship, but to reclaim my narrative and make it clear that my future was my own. "Are you sure about this?" Mr. Jackson asked when I told him my plan. "You don't owe them an explanation or a meeting." "I know," I said. "I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it for me." I instructed Miss Patel to arrange a meeting at her office. Professional, neutral territory, with a clear time limit and the presence of people who supported me. My parents agreed immediately, likely believing this was their opportunity to regain influence over me and, by extension, over the financial prospects of my invention. As the appointed day approached, I prepared myself for what would likely be the final conversation with the people who had once been the center of my universe. Not with fear or anger, but with a clarity I had fought hard to achieve. Miss Patel's law office occupied the 15th floor of a downtown building, its conference room offering panoramic views of the city skyline. I arrived early with Mr. Panoramic Jackson, who would remain in the waiting area, as we had agreed close enough for support if I needed it, but allowing me to handle the confrontation on my own terms. "Remember," he said, as we waited, "you control this meeting. You can end it at any time. And no matter what happens in there, you're coming home with me afterward." Home. Such a simple word that had taken on profound meaning in the years since I'd found sanctuary with him. My parents arrived exactly on time, dressed impeccably as always. My father in a tailored suit that probably cost more than Mr. Jackson's monthly mortgage payment. My mother in a designer dress and the pearl necklace she wore like armor to important occasions. They looked prosperous, polished, and completely out of place in the modest but professional offices of a public interest law firm. Miss Patel greeted them with professional courtesy, explaining the parameters of the meeting 1 hour, recorded with everyone's consent, with her present throughout. My father bristled visibly at having conditions imposed on his access to me, but he nodded agreement. When we entered the conference room, my parents moved to embrace me. I stepped back, maintaining physical distance. Their smiles faltered for just a moment before they recovered, taking their seats across the table from me. "Colton," my mother began, her voice warm but practiced. "We're so glad you agreed to meet. It's been far too long. 6 years, 2 months, and 14 days. I said quietly. "Since my 11th birthday when you locked me out of the house." My father cleared his throat. "We've all made mistakes. We're here to move forward, not dwell on the past." "That's the problem," I replied. "You see, abandoning your 11-year-old child as a mistake, like forgetting an anniversary or making a bad investment. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. A series of choices, actually, that demonstrated exactly how you viewed me." My mother's expression tightened. We were frustrated. "You were being disrespectful." "I was a child," I interrupted. "Children get frustrated. They say things they don't mean. The adults are supposed to be the ones who remain stable, who provide security no matter what. That's the basic contract of parenting." "We provided everything for you," my father countered. "The best schools, opportunities most kids could only dream of." "Things," I said. "You provided things. What you never provided was unconditional love or emotional safety. And when I finally spoke up about that, you threw me away." A heavy silence fell over the room. My parents exchanged glances, recalibrating their approach. My father leaned forward, adopting the reasonable, persuasive tone he used for difficult clients. Colton, we recognize that we made serious errors in judgment. We're not perfect parents. No one is. But we're still your family. Blood matters. DNA is just chemistry, I replied. Family is something else entirely. Family is the people who stand by you when it's hard, who care about your happiness more than your achievements, who would never, under any circumstances, abandon you. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, though I noticed, as I had in court years ago, no actual tears. We've missed you so much, darling. All these milestones we've missed. It breaks my heart. You terminated your parental rights, I reminded her. Voluntarily. You legally declared that you didn't want to be my parents anymore. That was your choice, not mine. My father's mask slipped slightly, irritation flashing in his eyes. The system gave us no realistic alternative. They were demanding all these classes, therapy sessions, as if we were criminals rather than parents trying to instill proper values. And there it is, I said. You still don't think you did anything wrong. You still believe throwing out an 11-year-old child was justifiable discipline. That's why this meeting isn't about reconciliation. Then what is it about? My father demanded, patience wearing thin. If not to re-establish our relationship, why are we here? I took a deep breath, centering myself. I wanted to see you once more, face to face, to tell you directly, I don't need you anymore. I don't want your approval, your connections, or your guidance. I have built a life without you, and it's a good one. This is about the money, isn't it? My father said, his voice hardening. You think because some tech company is interested in your little program that you don't need family support anymore. No, I replied calmly. This has nothing to do with money. If that app had never gotten any attention, if I was working an ordinary job and living an ordinary life, I would feel exactly the same way. This is about the fact that I deserve better than what you offered me. Every child does. My mother's practiced composure cracked slightly. After everything we sacrificed for you, what exactly did you sacrifice? I asked. Your comfort? Your convenience? Because from where I'm sitting, you sacrificed your child rather than examine your own behavior. And you only became interested in me again when you thought there might be something in it for you. My father abandoned pretense entirely, his expression cold. You've become incredibly entitled, Colton. This attitude is the result of 6 years with a guardian who actually cares about me as a person. I finished for him. Who taught me that I have value beyond what I can achieve or produce. Who showed me what real family looks like. That man is not your family, my father snapped. He's a paid caretaker. The insult to Mr. Jackson, the man who had saved me in every way a person can be saved, ignited a rare anger in me. But instead of lashing out, I channeled it into absolute clarity. Mr. Jackson was never paid to take me in, I said, my voice steady. He's a private foster parent who opened his home to me, out of compassion and basic human decency concepts you might want to research. He worked extra jobs to support me. He attended every school event, helped with every project, sat with me through nightmares about being abandoned, and never once made me feel like I was a burden or an inconvenience. He is more my family than you ever were. My mother's facade collapsed entirely, her expression turning bitter. This is how you repay us? After all we did, all we provided? I owe you nothing, I said simply. You made that clear when you terminated your parental rights. This meeting isn't about what I owe you or what you owe me. It's about me telling you, directly and clearly, that I release you from any obligation to me. You are not my parents, except in the most technical biological sense, and I want no further contact from you. My father's face flushed with anger. You'll regret this attitude when you're dealing with these tech corporations. They'll take advantage of you without proper guidance. I have connections. I have lawyers, I interrupted. Good ones, who are actually looking out for my interests. And I have Mr. Jackson, who has proven over and over that he cares about my well-being more than any potential profit. I stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. I didn't come here for your approval or your help. I came to make it absolutely clear that I don't want or need either. I wish you well in your lives, but those lives won't include me. My mother stood as well, her expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. You can't just dismiss us. We're your parents. No, I said quietly. You're the people who contributed DNA to my existence. Parenting is something else entirely, something I've been fortunate enough to experience with Mr. Jackson. And now, this meeting is over. I moved toward the door, but my father's voice stopped me. This isn't about family for you, he said coldly. It's about the money. Don't pretend it's anything else. I turned back to face them one last time. You know what's interesting? That's exactly what you would do in my position. You would only reconnect with someone if there was financial benefit. And that's the difference between us now. I've learned that relationships, real ones, aren't transactional. They're about care, respect, and showing up for each other consistently, not just when there's something to gain. I left the conference room without looking back, the weight of years lifting from my shoulders with each step. Mr. Jackson was waiting in the reception area, concern evident in his expression. "You okay, kid?" he asked. I nodded, surprised to find it was true. "Yeah, I really am." As we rode the elevator down to the lobby, I realized I felt neither triumph nor sorrow, just a profound sense of closure. The people upstairs were strangers to me now, ghosts from a past life who no longer had the power to wound me. Outside, the spring air was fresh and clean, the afternoon sun warming my face as we walked to Mr. Jackson's truck. "Want to talk about it?" he asked as we pulled away from the curb. I considered for a moment, then shook my head. "Not really. It's done. They're not part of my life anymore, my choice this time, not theirs." He nodded understanding. "So what now?" I smiled, looking ahead through the windshield, rather than back at the building we were leaving. "Now we go home. I've got homework to finish, and we need to figure out what's for dinner. Normal life. Real life. My life shaped by my choices, not their rejection." "Sounds like a plan," Mr. Jackson said, and we drove toward the future I was building, one day at a time. 1 year after that final meeting with my biological parents, I stood in the backyard of the home I now legally owned, watching Mr. Jackson Daniel, as he'd finally convinced me to call him, expertly grilling burgers for my high school graduation party. The modest house had been purchased with a portion of the proceeds from my app sale, which had ultimately gone through for a sum that still seemed unreal to me. The first thing I'd done after the sale closed was to pay off Daniel's mortgage. He'd protested, of course, insisting it wasn't necessary. "I didn't take you in for financial gain, Colton. I never expected anything back." "I know," I'd told him. "That's exactly why I want to do this. Not because I owe you, but because I love you." It was the first time I'd said those words to him directly, though we'd both known the truth of them for years. The emotion that had crossed his weathered face in that moment was worth every penny and more. Now, at 18, I was preparing to attend MIT in the fall on a full scholarship. The tech company that purchased my app had kept their promise of an internship position, which I would work during summer breaks. My future, which had once seemed so dark and uncertain, stretched before me, filled with possibilities. The backyard was crowded with people who had become my community over the past 7 years. Teachers who had encouraged me, friends who had accepted me, mentors who had guided me. Professor Lin was discussing quantum computing with my computer science teacher. Miss Rodriguez, the social worker who had helped remove me from my parents' home, was chatting with Dr. Bennett, the therapist who had helped me heal from that trauma. Aiden and his family, the neighbors who had taken me in that first terrible night, had driven up from Boston for the occasion. These people, none of them related to me by blood, had formed the tapestry of support that had allowed me not just to survive, but to thrive. As I helped Daniel carry a tray of finished burgers to the serving table, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From the terrified 11-year-old shivering on a curb, certain his life was over, to the confident young adult preparing for college. The path had not been easy or straight, but each step, even the painful ones, had been necessary. "Speech time!" called one of my friends, and the gathered crowd quieted, turning toward me with expectant smiles. Public speaking had never been my strong suit, another disappointment to my biological parents. But standing before these people who had shown me what true support looked like, I found the words coming easily. 7 years ago, I began, I thought I had lost everything. My home, my family, my future, all gone in a single night. What I didn't realize then was that night wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. I glanced at Daniel, who nodded encouragement. I learned that family isn't defined by DNA or legal documents. It's defined by love, by showing up for each other, by creating spaces where we can be authentically ourselves without fear of rejection. I acknowledged each group: my teachers, my friends, the social workers and legal advocates who had protected me, the foster care system that, for all its flaws, had connected me with Daniel. Each of you played a part in my journey. Each of you showed me that I mattered, not for what I could achieve or how I could make you look good, but simply because I exist. That's a gift I can never fully repay, but I can pay it forward. And that was the other significant development in my life. With a portion of my app Proceeds, I had established a foundation to support children in the foster care system, particularly those aging out without family support. The Colton Bennett Foundation would provide scholarships, housing assistance, and mentorship to young people who, like me, needed to know they weren't alone in the world. My story could have gone very differently, I continued. Without the intervention of caring adults, without a system that, however imperfectly, tries to protect children, without a guardian who chose to love me unconditionally, I might have become just another statistic. Another kid who fell through the cracks. Daniel wiped suspiciously at his eyes, pretending it was smoke from the grill. Instead, I stand before you today with a future full of possibilities, and I promise to use those possibilities to create more paths for others, because no child should ever feel unwanted or disposable. No child should ever believe that their value lies only in what they can achieve or provide. The foundation was already working with local agencies to identify youth who could benefit from its programs. The first scholarships would be awarded that fall, a fact that gave me more pride than any academic achievement or technical innovation ever could. 7 years ago, my mother told me I would come back begging within a month, I said, my voice steady. She was wrong about that, as she was wrong about so many things. What she never understood is that love isn't something to be earned through obedience or achievement. It's something to be given freely, especially to those who need it most. I raise my glass. So this isn't just a celebration of my graduation. It's a celebration of the family we choose, the communities we build, the love that transforms and heals. The applause was warm and genuine, absent the polite restraint that had characterized the social gatherings of my early childhood. These people weren't performing affection. They were expressing it honestly. After the party wound down and the last guests departed, Daniel and I sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies begin to emerge in the summer twilight. "Proud of you, kid," he said simply. "Always have been." "Even when I was that angry 12-year-old who broke your favorite coffee mug?" I asked with a smile. "Especially then," he replied. "Because you were fighting to survive, to believe you deserved better than what happened to you. That takes courage." We rocked in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythm soothing and familiar. "I got another email from them yesterday," I said eventually. "My biological parents." Daniel didn't react beyond a slight tilt of his head. "What did it say?" "The usual. They're reconsidering their position and open to reconciliation under the right circumstances. They've heard about the foundation and think they could contribute valuable guidance to its development." He snorted softly. Translation: "They've realized cutting ties completely means no access to your success, so they're trying a new angle." Exactly. I hadn't responded to the email, just as I hadn't responded to any of their intermittent attempts at contact over the past year. I'm not angry anymore. I just have nothing to say to them. "Anger takes too much energy," Daniel agreed. "Better to channel it into something constructive, like the foundation, like mentoring younger kids in the foster system, like building a life defined by what I gave rather than what I achieved." "You know," I said, "when I was little, before everything fell apart, I used to dream about making my parents proud. I thought if I could just be perfect enough, smart enough, accomplished enough, they would finally love me the way I needed to be loved." Daniel's expression saddened. "No child should have to earn their parents' love." "I know that now," I assured him. "But the funny thing is, in trying so hard to please them, I never got to figure out who I actually was or what I actually wanted. It took losing them to find myself." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Being thrown away at 11, an act of cruelty that no child should ever experience, had ultimately freed me from the toxic expectations and conditional affection that had defined my early years. "What do you want now?" Daniel asked. "Beyond college and the internship, I mean. For your life." I considered the question carefully. No one in my first family had ever asked what I wanted, only what I had accomplished or how I was performing. "I want to build things that help people," I said finally. "Technology that makes lives better, especially for kids who are struggling. I want to expand the foundation. Maybe someday adopt a kid who needs a home, the way you took me in." Daniel smiled. "That sounds like a good life." "It does," I agreed. "But mostly, I want to stay connected to the things that matter. To remember that relationships are more important than achievements. To never become so focused on success that I forget about compassion. In the distance, the first star appeared in the darkening sky. As a child, I had wished on stars for parental approval that never came. Now, I wished for something different. The strength to keep my heart open despite past wounds. The wisdom to use my experiences to help others. The courage to continue choosing love over fear. Daniel seemed to read my thoughts, as he often did. "You're going to be okay, Colton. Better than okay." "I know," I said, and for perhaps the first time in my life, I truly believed it. The phone in my pocket buzzed another message, perhaps from my biological parents, perhaps from someone else entirely. I let it go unanswered. The present moment, sitting in peaceful companionship with the man who had taught me what family really means, was too precious to interrupt. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new choices. But whatever came, I would face it with the knowledge that my worth wasn't determined by what I produced or achieved. It was inherent, unchangeable, and complete. That was the gift Daniel had given me, one that no academic honor, tech innovation, or financial success could ever match. And it was the gift I intended to pass on, in whatever ways I could, for the rest of my life. That night, as I fell asleep in the bedroom that had become truly mine over the years, I realized that the frightened 11-year-old I once was could finally rest. He was safe, he was loved, and his future, our future, was bright with possibility. I want to sincerely thank you for watching my story to the end. If you connected with any part of my journey, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience. Have you ever had someone in your life like Daniel who showed up for you when you needed it most? Share your experience in the comments below. Remember that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who make space for you when no one else will. If this video touched you, please share it with someone who might need to hear that their past doesn't define their future. Until next time, stay strong and keep moving forward.